Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic installment. I hope everyone's doing good. It is Saturday at about 9:56. The weekend is here. This is a blues festival weekend. People out there who might not be familiar with it, but the blues festival is one of the bigger music festivals that they have here in Maine. It's a seasonal thing. It's every July, and it's usually a big thing for the local economy. It takes place in Rockland, Maine. They bring in a bunch of really well-known blues national acts usually, and it goes for uh, roughly 3 days, 2 full days. They have like a main stage that they set up, and then probably the thing that's always I've always thought is kind of the coolest part of it, outside of outside of the ticketed venue, is the pub crawl. The pub crawl is a big thing where they set up bands all around town, and it's usually all outside, but there's a lot of pretty cool bands, and it's great for the local economy. But then it also employs a lot of the local musicians and bands. They do have to get sponsored to be able to make money, so it gets a little tricky. But for the most part, everybody does make a little bit of money. I always feel that the main thing for musicians here in Maine and just in general is whatever they're doing, whatever they're trying to, um, do in their careers. It's a trade at the end of the day, and so they need to get paid for it. So that's they need to be compensated and taken care of, and for the most part, that happens for this festival. The blues festival is probably, as far as music goes, it's probably the biggest. Uh, Somewhat, I would say probably the biggest, the most established festival here in Maine. The other festival that's really big is the Lobster Festival. That's in August. That does employ local bands. It's a little bit of a different scenario, but it does bring in. They also bring in national acts, but they also bring in. They do employ and hire local musicians for different events. So I have typically I've played at the blues festival for years and years and years, and so it's usually pretty fun. I was in a few bands over the years that were always a part of the pub crawl. And years ago when I was doing it, it was, I don't know, some of the most fun I ever had playing music, because the crowds were just nuts and crazy and just wild. But I was really um, lucky and privileged to play with some really great musicians at the Blues Festival. And I got to, learn a lot from a lot of great players. There was a phenomenal guitar player that used to live in this area, Greg McGowan, who's just a monster player. He moved away quite a few years ago, and when he moved, it really changed the music scene for a while. There just wasn't that kind of energy anymore. But I was fortunate enough to play with him for quite a few years. And that's the thing when I talk about music on this channel. One of the things I always feel is, if you get the opportunity, talking as a musician, if you get the opportunity, regardless of where you're at with your style or your ability, if you get the opportunity to play with people that are better than you in some ways, it can be really hard and tough, obviously for obvious reasons. But I feel like you really develop and really, you know, uh, learn so much as a musician. It's kind of like music school. When I played with Greg, it was like going to music school all the time, because he was so damn good and so much more experienced than I was, and he always pushed me. For good or bad, it was always great. And I remember meeting another guitar player at that time, who I ended up playing quite a few shows with, Chris Kleeman, who was friends with Greg, and he was from Vermont, and he was a touring guitar player. He had a band, and he would tour around the country. And I got to play a lot of gigs with him at one point through Greg. which was a lot of fun. And again, it was one of those situations where I learned a lot. And Chris Kleeman's like one of his big claim to fames was that he got to tour and play a bunch of shows with BB King, and he was BB King's one of the legends in the blues style. So I was really fortunate to play with a high level player like that for a while, and so that's going on this weekend. Started last night. I played at the annual blues jam that they have. I basically bring my drums and play for a little while, and then there was about four other drummers that showed up. I remember doing the blues jam a long time ago, and there was literally about 10 drummers that showed up. And I don't usually get a chance to play all that much at it because there's a lot of people. I play like in the beginning, and then take a break, and then get try to get other people involved to play, and then I play at the end of the night. Um, but I basically just kind of hang out for the most part. I try to play as much as I can, but I want to give everybody a nice opportunity to play, and I kind of expect it to be that kind of situation. But getting back to Quantum stuff, we have quite a few gigs actually coming up for Quantum, which I'm really excited about, really psyched. Some things that just came in recently for gigs. But next week we will be playing at Sophia, which is a super cool bar in Belfast. We're going to be playing Friday night, next Friday, and it's going to be a 7:30 start time, and we'll be doing like a 2 hour, 2.5 hour set of our material. Super excited to play there. We've never played at this venue, Sophia. Very cool place. It's a tiny little bar, but it's a very cool little hip little place. So very excited about that. I've been doing a lot of promotion around that show. It's our first time playing there. We don't have all that much experience playing in Belfast. We did play at the All Roads Festival, which is my favorite music festival here in Maine. That's a more that's like kind of an indie rock, you know, um, music festival, but it really showcases original talent, and it really the thing that's really great too is they really treat the bands really well for that. It's really organized. They treat the bands incredibly well. There's no we got to play it this year for the first time. There was no hiccups as far as the logistics of that festival, where there's like at least 40 bands playing and it's 2 days. So, well, considering how complex it could be or could have been, it was easy as far as the logistics, and they paid the bands incredibly well, and we were fortunate enough to play 2 days, to play Friday and Saturday. So very excited about coming back to Belfast. We played in Belfast a couple times in the past at a gallery, Aarhus, quite a few years ago, but it's been closed for a long time. So we haven't gotten a chance to really be back in Belfast. And I love Belfast. It's a town that is about 7 minutes away from me. So very much looking forward to that. And then that Saturday, we Quantum is going to be doing a radio show, a live performance on WRFR in Rockland, Maine, on my friend Spencer Roulard's show, who is um, a really cool electronic artist, very knowledgeable guy about sound. We've done. Uh, he has an electronic group called Method for Madness, and we did two shows together. Um, well, last year now, or I should say this year, we did two concerts together, or three, actually three shows. So a lot of fun. He plays all this great modular stuff, but he has a show on WRFR, which is the local radio station in Rockland, and we're going to do like an hour and a half performance. At start time around 2 o'clock on a Saturday. It's going to be the day after Sophia's gig. So very excited about that. We did play there on his station a few months ago. Had some problems with the show not being able to get recorded. So that's the goal for this second show, is to hopefully, if it's a decent or good performance, we can get it recorded and and maybe we can use it for promotional things or just to have. So very excited about that. We'll be doing some promotion starting next week for that. And then after that, we'll be doing the next show that we have after that, I believe, is Primo. We will be playing, Quantum will be playing a Primo restaurant in, I guess it's Owl's Head, Rockland area. An amazing place, probably the best restaurant in Maine. It's just an incredible place, a real high end place, but just amazing, amazing food. And they started about 2 or 3 years ago. Primo started this really cool music series where they have music every Sunday afternoon, and it's an awesome gig. I've been fortunate enough to play a lot of those gigs, and it's usually like a 2 to 4 slot. And again, they treat the bands really, really well. It's a beautiful atmosphere. It's outside, and we'll be playing there with Quantum. And I was really surprised about us being able to get a gig there. I didn't think that our stuff would be, I don't know, appropriate for that kind of setting. But they, I had sent them some links, just giving them the idea of what we sound like, and they seem to be really into it. So, and they have a pretty interesting mix of different bands. They have full bands, and then they have solos, and they mix things up. They have reggae, and then they have rock, and they have different things there. So, pretty excited about that. Very, very excited. Primo is probably overall my favorite gig, my favorite place to play, just because of the atmosphere, just everything. It's just really awesome. So I'm very, very excited about being able to play there with Quantum at this amazing venue. So very excited about that. And so, yeah, and of course there'll be, when probably in another week or so, I'll start doing some major promotion for that show. That has a little bit of a built-in thing because they do it every week. They do it every Sunday, and there's always like pretty good amount of people that come out to it, and it's rain or shine, which is nice because the weather pretty much just sucks. So they've adapted to that quite a bit here, and so it's been it's been good for the local musicians to be able to still, stay employed and still make some money. And the next gig coming up after that will be at a cool place, a very cool place that I've actually thought would be, actually kind of always thought it would be a cool venue for us. And that is a place that opened about 2 years ago called Lucky Betty's. And it's in Camden, Maine, and it's basically an old car garage right on Main Street that was turned into a converted bar. And it's a super cool place. They have it. It's like an open air thing. They have the garage is still intact, but it's a super cool bar. Really cool atmosphere. They have a big outdoor kind of seating area that people can sit and hang out and drink, and they have a little menu for food, and then they have a big, pretty good size inside space. And they used to do music right through the winter. My great friend Andre Lescus, who is an amazing guitar player, musician, an old friend of mine, he has been in charge of doing music there for a while, and he was doing these series where they do like a music showcase, and they basically do it on a Wednesday night or a Thursday night, where they would have about 4 or 5 different groups on there. They don't typically have bands, but they would typically have like duos or a lot of solo artists. I played one gig in there last year with my band Bone Broth, and I played drum set inside, and it was I think it was in the fall or winter, and it went pretty good. I was a little bit curious and a little bit nervous to see how it would go over to have drum sets in a drum set inside this place, but it seemed like it went over pretty well. But the music series is really, really, really cool. So they're starting up again. The first one is coming up in a couple weeks, and then we're gonna be doing a Quantum set with and we'll be involved with one of these showcases, and we're going to be playing there in August. So very excited about that, and it's going to be on a Thursday night. So yeah, it'll be another first for us to play at this new venue, and it's a great little place. I've played there one other time, so this will be our first with Quantum. So very excited about that show, and there'll be a lot of promotion for that coming up. So stay tuned for that. And then we just booked a couple of other gigs at this new venue that just opened in Thomaston. That used to be a really great venue years ago. It was called Billy's Tavern, and it used to be a really great destination for music. I saw a lot of great bands back in the day. Billy's Tavern used to be called, was the former name, and it was an awesome place. Like, people used to go out to that place all the time, and then it closed and went through all these different changes. Somebody else bought it. It didn't really work out. Didn't last very long. Not a lot of people came out, and so, but there's now a new owner and a new kind of revamping of energy at this place. So now it's the Hilltop Tavern, and I did go in there on Fourth of July, and it was very busy, and it's a cool spot, and we're going to be doing two Quantum shows there. So very excited about that. That's a little ways away, but there'll be a bunch of promotion when we get closer. So very excited about that. So, trying to keep the train on the tracks, as they say. So today's show is on one of my favorite directors of all time, and I've talked about him a lot in past videos and just overall. One of my favorite directors of all time, who is still working and still really putting out incredible work, is the legendary Martin Scorcese. He's always been one of my favorite directors. The list of movies that he has done is pretty unbelievable. The other thing too is the consistency that he has in his career. I feel like he's one of the most consistent directors. He's been around pretty much since like the 70s, and he's still going, and it's pretty inspiring. He's always been one of my favorites. The list of movies that he's done is just pretty staggering. Goodfellas, of course, which came out in 1990, amazing movie. Arguably my favorite film of his, but it's a close tie to the movie I'm going to be talking about. Taxi Driver in 1976, masterpiece, just a masterpiece. And then newer films that he's done, or more recent films, The Wolf of Wall Street, which came out in 2013. Amazing movie. Amazing movie. So much fire in that film. And then his last film that I saw, which I think is one of his best movies that he's ever done, and that is The Irishman. Incredible movie. What an epic movie. I just love that movie. And I believe that was the last film he put out. Shutter Island in 2010, which is quite of a departure for his style. Scorsese is typically known for making crime-based movies, really gritty, edgy movies, and also lots of films, obviously, with Goodfellas and Casino, that deal with the mafia. But Shutter Island is quite a bit different. I almost feel like that movie is like a horror movie in a lot of ways. It definitely has horror elements. It's a suspense kind of thriller, but it's a pretty intense movie, and that movie is very much has a horror influence. Another movie that he did also, he's worked a long time and has done a lot of great films with Leonardo DiCaprio. There's the Departed in 2006, which is such an awesome movie. I love that movie. I think that's also one of his best movies. And of course, the legendary Raging Bull with Robert De Niro in 1980, just a masterpiece. Masterpiece. A lot of these movies I want to eventually do reviews for, and I will. And then of course another mafia epic, Casino, in 1995, incredible movie, another masterpiece. I love that movie. I recently bought that. Last year I bought that on Blu-ray. and I hadn't seen that in years. But man, what a great movie! Another movie, which is one of his more recent movies, is Silence, which is a really good movie. Also, totally under the radar. I don't think anybody saw that movie, but really, really good movie. And again, it's one of his later films, but it's so kick ass. Gangs of New York, 2002, with Daniel Day Lewis. Another really great movie. I believe that was the first movie that he did with Leonardo DiCaprio. Aviator in 2004, another incredible movie with DiCaprio. Hugo in 2011, amazing movie. I mean, there's so many great movies. One of my favorite movies of all time, and one of my favorite Scorsese movies, is The Last Temptation of Christ with Willem Dafoe playing Jesus. That came out in 1988. That movie is just so amazing. One of the most, especially when that film came out, one of the most controversial movies at the time. It's a story of Jesus. It's based on a book, but it's basically a rendition or a version of Jesus, as if he, you know, in Christianity, Jesus is looked at as the Son of God, but he's also regarded to a degree as being a human. He has the conflicts of every of what it's like to be human, but he's the Son of God, and in this story, Jesus basically tries to live a human life where he becomes a father, and it's an amazing movie. Very intense. One of the greatest scores ever. Some of the music was written by Peter Gabriel, but just amazing. One of my favorite movies. Harvey Keitel plays Judas. After Hours in 1985, a really great movie. Haven't seen that in years. Another one which I think is one of his best, which is a remake, Cape Fear in 1991. The other movie, which was actually a remake, is The Departed. That's actually a remake of I think it's a Japanese movie, but amazing. Cape Fear, I just think, is unbelievable. Robert De Niro is so incredibly frightening in it. Another one that is just an amazing movie, which I just saw recently, The King of Comedy, also starring De Niro. He has the longest working collaboration with De Niro. He's in so many of his movies. Another movie of his, which is just an incredible film, is The Age of Innocence with Daniel Day Lewis, and that came out in 1983. Incredible movie. Incredible movie. The Color of Money with Paul Newman. Another amazing movie. I'd love to see that again. I haven't seen that in so long. He also has done some documentaries. The Last Waltz, about the band. Incredible movie. One of the greatest music documentaries ever. Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore in 1974. Just incredible. One of his most avant-garde or experimental films, The Big Shave in 1967, which was technically his first feature or his first movie. It's a short, and it's intense. It's basically just a guy in a bathroom shaving his face, and then he eventually starts like cutting himself and cuts his own throat, and it's unbelievable. Shine a Light, which is a documentary he did on the Rolling Stones. He's always been very outspoken about his love for the Rolling Stones and the use of their music in a lot of his films. Uh, so many movies. He did this incredible movie also about George Harrison in 2011, my favorite Beatle documentary. Just amazing. One of my favorite documentaries. I mean, the list is just endless. It's unbelievable. Um, but the thing with Scorsese is his track record. Like, he's so consistent. I've seen lots of interviews, like, about, well, in particularly interviews with, like, say, um, Quentin Tarantino, who I also think is a really consistent director overall. Um, and he's talked a lot, about on the subject of certain directors where they seem, certain directors that are legendary directors. You have some directors that have this incredible consistent body of work, and then you have other directors that are still really good, but you kind of feel like in the later parts of their career or certain parts of their career, they, I don't know, something happened, something with a skew, and the movies and the quality is just not that good. Directors who I feel are where they just have, through and through an amazing body of work. For me, I would say the biggest one would be Stanley Kubrick. I mean, every movie he's done is pretty much a masterpiece as far as I'm concerned. And, and also his ability to move into different genres, horror films, you name it, just everything. War movies, science fiction. Other directors too, I feel that have that ability. Well, I think Quentin Tarantino is one of those directors. Really, really consistent. Pretty much every movie he's done has been just incredible, and he just still has that fire and that kind of rawness, that energy that he is always pushing in his films. Another one of my favorite directors is Akira Kurosawa, Japanese, one of the greatest directors ever, probably the greatest Japanese director ever. And his body of work is just massive. And I mean, just I have yet to see a Kurosawa movie that isn't good. Just everything I feel like that he's done is a masterpiece. Um, just a long, really consistent track record. I also feel too another director who has a really long track record, and a lot of his later films are actually really good, and that's kind of how I discovered his work, and then went backwards. But I really think, um, I can't remember his name, brain fart. The other director, which I couldn't remember his name for some reason, Woody Allen. I think his body work is pretty amazing too. And again, so many movies, and I really can't think of too many Woody Allen movies that I think that aren't very good. I kind of discovered his work kind of almost backwards. Like I was exposed to his like later work, his more recent films, and then I worked my way back. I always knew who he was as a director, but I really liked some of the newer films that he had done, and then I really there was one movie in particular that I really liked that he did called Match Point, and I saw that like maybe, and I always knew who Woody Allen was. I always appreciated his work, but I remember seeing Match Point in the theater years ago, and it's a really awesome movie. I saw it years ago. It's one of his newer films, even though it came out quite a few years ago. And I just really there was something about that movie that I really loved, and I own it, and I just really love that movie. But that really got me into Woody Allen, and I started to seek out a lot of his movies, and then I became a real big fan of his work, and I think his body of work is just incredible. Um, Another director I think is really really consistent for the most part is Roman Polanski, another one of my favorite directors. And then you have on the other side of the spectrum, and I of course including Martin Scorsese in this talk, as being just an incredible, consistent director. Other directors I feel that, and again this is subject to my own opinion, but other directors I feel that don't have that consistency where it's like I don't know what happened with their career. I think directors like Ridley Scott, Brian De Palma. Another one I think is a legendary director who had just an incredible body work is, of course, Alfred Hitchcock. But I think directors where their careers kind of went, the train went off the tracks. I'm not sure what the heck happened. But I think like Ridley Scott, I think Brian De Palma. Um, there's a handful of other directors where I'm not quite sure because like early on in their careers, particularly Ridley Scott and Brian De Palma, they just did master. directed these series of films that I feel are just masterpieces, just incredible. And something what happened. Something happened. I don't know what went askew. I don't know if it was a studio thing, pressure in the studio, not being able to get financed. Very strange. But there are a lot of directors out there that I feel are not really consistent, and I find more so now that there's directors that come out that put out one or two really good movies, and then you're like, I don't know what happened after that, and they put out another handful of movies, and it's all like there's no consistency. There's no like the level is the bar is not as high. It's but my favorite, and again, it's very hard to say, but my favorite Scorsese movie, I have to say, is this film right here, and that is Mean Streets, starring Harvey Keitel, Robert De Niro. This movie is just so incredible. It's pretty much my favorite film, and it's basically about these, small time crooks of these guys that live in a real rough neighborhood, and they get caught up in these circumstances through gambling, going into debt, and they get mixed in with this crowd or group of people that are very dangerous, and they get sucked into this situation, and they basically end up paying with their lives. And it's got one of the most incredible endings ever for a film. The build up to the movie is just amazing. The cinematography is just breathtaking. The music, it's just an amazing movie. It's so raw. It's such a raw movie. This movie, this Blu-ray edition, and again, this is my favorite Scorsese movie. This is kind of like my Reservoir Dogs for Tarantino. But it's such a raw, it's such a gritty movie. All the characters are like, they're so complicated. Like, they have these really dark kind of aspects to them, but then they have these really likable traits. And they get caught into this web of darkness to where they eventually pay with their lives. And the ending and where the story builds up is just incredible. There's one scene in particular in this movie where De Niro and Keitel, Harvey Keitel, are in this bar, and this bar fight happens, and it's just so incredible. And it's basically one shot, and the music of the Rolling Stones is playing, and it's just so incredible. This Blu-ray edition is really really awesome. I've seen this movie so many times, and I picked this up maybe I think it was a couple of years ago. I got this Blu-ray edition, but it's amazing. It is again like one of those experiences like I've talked about before. It's like seeing it for the first time. And technically, this is his first full-length feature. And man, it's so gritty, it's so dirty, and it's such a raw movie. It's so in your face. It's really dark. It's really violent. The ending is just super brutal. Scorsese's known for the violence in his films, and this is definitely one of them. But it's just so like, it's such a great character study, and like by the end, by the climactic ending when it finally arrives, you're so enamored, and at least for me, you're so rooting for these guys, even though they're not really good guys, they're not really bad guys. They're kind of gray and they're in the middle, but they're just trying to struggle to survive in this, kind of cesspool environment. But my God, it's such an epic movie. And if you've never seen it, I highly, highly recommend it. Basically, the synopsis of it is a slice of street life in Little Italy among the lower echelon of the unbalanced punks and petty criminals. A small time hood gets in over his head with a vicious loan shark. In an attempt to free himself from the dangers of his debt, he gets the help from a friend who's also involved in other criminal activities. And it just deals with the dark underbelly of like New York City and all of these guys and girls trying to just do whatever they can, even if it's illegal, to survive. But then also what ends up coming, their actions come with a cost, and their cost happens to be their lives, and they get involved and pulled into these, into darker, much darker and darker. As the story progresses, they get pulled into much more of a darker situation. So, but amazing, amazing movie. And again, like all of those films I talked about, there's so many, and but this is the top of the food chain for me. 1973, Mean Streets. This movie is the shit. So thanks again, and we will see you next time. This is Jason Dean. Have a great day. Peace.